into today's topic. Welcome everyone to the Mindfulness Broadcast. I'm Theo. Happy to be here with you today. And today I wanted to talk about some of the kind of fundamental ways that we can think about mindfulness. And one of the primary ways, as far as the research is concerned, is mindfulness as a way to build our attentional control. There's a spectrum of ways that we can kind of consider mindfulness, all the way from it being a little bit more of a spiritual practice and kind of the touchy-feely aspects of mindfulness, which I find to be really useful. And then on the other end of that spectrum, we can think of it as neural training. And this is when we kind of strip it of any of its kind of spirituality or any of the elements from its beginnings, which, are obviously in Asian religious and Buddhist practices. If we strip it of all that, it actually becomes an effective way to become a neural training. And when we utilize mindfulness as neural training, what we're up to is we are essentially performing neural exercises that produce predictable outcomes in cognitive performance and emotional intelligence. So these are proven tools. It's the same thing essentially as exercising in the gym. Only what we're doing here is we're training our minds. So the attentional control that we're going to focus on today is specifically designed to direct and sustain our focus. And directing and sustaining our focus is a critical skill, probably more than it has ever been, just given that we live in an attentional economy. And an attentional economy is essentially one in which there are constantly things that are vying for our attention, which makes it that much more important to be able to control our own attention and our own focus. And so mindfulness and neural training as skills become all the much more important in this environment. So these are kind of practical ways that we can think about mindfulness. So when we practice mindfulness and when we think about attention, there are two broad categories that we can think of in terms of our attention. And one we could think of as spotlight attention, and the other we could think of as floodlight attention. So spotlight attention is what we'll be practicing today. And you can maybe think about it in terms of flow states. So if any of you have ever played a sport, or if you have a hobby that you really enjoy and you just get kind of tunnel vision on that one specific thing, that's an example of a spotlight attention, where you're just focused on something really specific and you tune everything else out. And then we also have the floodlight aspect of attention, which is when we really broaden our attention to include essentially everything. So that would include the five senses, and it would also include what are sometimes referred to as mental objects. So that is more the floodlight, and that is something that we can practice as well. But today we're going to practice on spotlight, which is generally where most mindfulness practices will start in terms of really honing our ability to pay attention to specific things. And I want to kind of break down the process of that as a neural exercise so that you can kind of get a sense of what it is that we're doing. So the first thing we do is we focus. So in this case, what we're going to do, and this is something that we've done in previous mindfulness broadcasts and you've probably encountered already, so we're going to direct our attention to the sensation of the breath. And the breath is a really helpful object, both because it's always with us, but also because when we focus on the breath, we're able to shift our nervous system into parasympathetic, where we're more calm. So it's also a form of regulation. And then, inevitably, what's going to happen is we're going to become distracted. So when we become distracted, we just notice that the mind is going to wander. And then that leads to the third step, which is the awareness that the mind has wandered. Right? So we become aware of distraction without any judgment. And then the fourth step is just a return. So we gently direct our attention back to the breath. And this is essentially a neural exercise. So every cycle that we work through in these 4 steps is essentially strengthening our attention control. And sometimes we think the magic is just to be free from thoughts completely, right? A lot of people have this idea that good meditation is being free from thoughts. But actually what it is it's the ability to harness that awareness to then return to the object of focus. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for everyone. So we're going to go ahead and do a practice now, so that you can engage this neural training yourself. So I'm just going to invite you to notice what's in your environment. Just take a look around, and then get yourself into a body position that feels both upright and relaxed. And then once you've kind of settled into that, if it feels comfortable to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. If you'd prefer, you can just have your eyes gazing kind of half closed at the floor in front of you. And then we're just going to take a couple of deep breaths all the way into the belly. Hold for a bit, and then release. And hold at the other end. Then bring the breath back into the belly. Hold, and then release again. And then just allow the breath to return to its natural state. And focus your attention on the breath moving in and moving out. Find a place where it feels most alive. Kind of the easiest place for you to notice the change and the sensations as you breathe. So we're engaging in step 1 of the process. Just noticing physical sensations of the breath. And then, as inevitably will happen, notice the distraction. The intrusive thought, the itch, whatever it might be, which is step 2. It's just the mind being the mind. And step 3 is just to become aware of that without any judgment. And then step 4 is just to return your attention to the breath. Find that place where you can rest the spotlight of your awareness. Could be the way that the air flows across your upper lip, or the way it comes into your nose. Just noticing the physical sensations of air traveling into the body. and then returning out into the atmosphere. And then again, notice if there are any distractions. Harness your awareness and be free from any judgment. Note that this is an opportunity to train your capacity for attention and focus. And simply nudge yourself back to the sensations of the breath. And then when you're ready, go ahead and slowly return to the space where you are. You can sway back and forth if that feels helpful. You can wiggle your fingers and your toes, stretch your arms, slowly open your eyes. And just notice what it's like to do some of those neural exercises. Notice how you feel. And in addition, I would encourage you to carry this out into your day. And whether that means doing one of these simple awareness of breath exercises for a minute or two during your lunch break, or whether it means noticing how when you're focused on a task, how long can you stay focused on that task? What is it that distracts you? Becoming aware of that distraction, gently nudging yourself back to the task, and then acknowledging like, okay, I've just done it. I've done a little bit more of this neural training. I have successfully nudged myself towards more and more attentional control and focus.